Texas, a 767 cargo plane flying for Amazon Prime has crashed into Trinity Bay near Anahuac, Texas, about 30 miles southeast of Houston. The picture on the left is the live photos in Trinity Bay of the fuselage wreckage. The photo on the right is from Jason Rabinowitz of Airline Flyer. He happened to take that photo of what he believes is the aircraft that crashed, that photo taken at Miami International Airport this morning, just before that Prime Air 767 departed. Initial reports say that 3 people were on board that aircraft when the plane went down. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new hour of America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shawn.
And I'm Arthel Neville. The aircraft was flying from Miami to Houston when it lost radar and radio contact shortly before reaching its destination. Jackie Heinrich is following this story from our New York City newsroom. Jackie?
Arthel, the local sheriff's office is reporting they have not found any survivors at this time, and they don't expect to find any. There were 3 people on board that plane. We're just now getting our first look at the wreckage. The Chambers County Sheriff's Office described it as total devastation. There's debris and landing gear scattered all over. The area where the plane went down is a muddy marsh in Anahuac's Trinity Bay, known for duck hunting. The marshland is making for a difficult recovery as investigators search for victims and the plane's black box.
The first thing that I saw the minute I got out there was just floating debris, everything from bed sheets to women's clothing to cardboard boxes to a lot of fiberglass. And then as we got close, is probably not much larger than about 50 feet.
This is the plane before it took off this morning in Miami. The 767 is one of 30 in Amazon's fleet. It was 26 years old, according to information on its tail number. The cargo flight was heading from Houston to from Miami into Houston, and according to radar, it gained considerable speed as it plunged into the water, and there was also no distress call. The FAA issued an alert on Atlas Air Flight 3951 after losing radio contact about 30 miles southeast of Houston's Bush Intercontinental Airport. The weather in Houston was clear, so visibility should not have been a problem, but the plane may have crossed through some storm cells on its way into Texas. The NTSB will ultimately investigate the cause of the crash. Local officials say the cleanup and investigation could take weeks. Eric and Arthel.
Thank you very much. It's a very sad story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric?
And we have new information on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's sentencing memo about Paul Manafort. That was released to the public today. Well, according to the heavily redacted memo, the former Trump campaign chairman, quote,
redacted is accurate. You can see the black lines right here. The deadline was last night at midnight. That deadline was met, but the documents were not released until just a few hours ago. Now, there are 800 pages in total. That includes all of the exhibit documents. The actual sentencing memo right here, just 25 pages, and it is redacted, as I mentioned. Now, I spoke with our justice producer who says there are no major bombshells here. In fact, many expected to find out a prison recommendation for Paul Manafort from the special counsel, but there's no specific sentence number mentioned. I want to read part of that memo. It reads, quote, Manafort chose repeatedly and knowingly to violate the law, whether the laws prescribed garden variety crimes such as tax fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and bank fraud, or more esoteric laws that he nevertheless was intimately familiar with, such as the Foreign Agents Registration Act, better known as FARA. Now, this news about Manafort comes as an official with the Justice Department told Fox News just yesterday the special counsel's report will not be released to the Justice Department this coming week. Court documents allege Manafort shared polling data with an associate who authorities argue has ties to the Russian intelligence community. Back in September of last year, Manafort pled guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy related to his lobbying work in Ukraine as part of a plea agreement. Now, Mueller's team originally planned to offer Manafort some sort of leniency for cooperation, but that all went out of the window when the judge found out that Manafort allegedly lied to investigators after agreeing to work with them. Important to point out, this is not the only case on Manafort's plate. On March 8th, in a few weeks, he'll be sentenced in a Virginia case involving tax and bank fraud. 69-year-old Paul Manafort could get up to 25 years in that Virginia case. The sentencing memo wraps up arguing that releasing Paul Manafort from prison presents a risk of him doing it all over again. Eric?
Wow. Meanwhile, Dave, you showed us all those redactions where they hide stuff. Is there any possibility that some of those redactions could ever be made public? We could find out exactly what's in it.
A lot of people want to know exactly what's in it, the juicy parts of this document. It's not likely that's going to happen until the Mueller report is totally released and the Manafort case is closed. And we're told that that could be wrapping up soon. He's going to be in court here in the next month.
All right,
Eric.
we'll see when that report finally comes out. David, thank you. All right, Thel?
Sure.
Eric, thank you. A Chicago judge has set R&B star R. Kelly's bond at $1 million after he was charged with 10 counts of felony sexual abuse. The 52-year-old singer, whose real name is Robert Sylvester Kelly, has been in police custody since turning himself in last night. Prosecutors say Kelly abused 4 women, 3 of whom were minors between 1998 and 2010. Kelly's lawyer accuses the women of lying.
Right now, he's presumed innocent. We haven't seen any reason to believe that these allegations are credible.
Matt Finn is following this story live from the courthouse there in Chicago. Matt?
Arthel, R. Kelly needs to post just 10% of that $1 million bond, but R. Kelly's attorney says that the singer is so broke he does not have the $100,000 to get himself out of jail right now. So right now we are just kind of on an R. Kelly standby to see if he could bond himself out of jail. As a part of the bond, R. Kelly must also submit his passport, stay away from the witnesses in this case, and also anyone under the age of 18. Celebrity attorney Michael Avenatti, who represented Stormy Daniels, claims he is representing at least one of the girls in this case, and he says he submitted a video to prosecutor that depicts Robert Kelly engaged in a sexual act with a 14-year-old girl. Today, the state's attorney says that girl's aunt confirms that that is her niece in the video. Here is Michael Avenatti and R. Kelly's attorney.
There is also a scene on the tape during which Mr. Kelly engages in choking the 14-year-old victim, as well as other simulated sexual acts, which I'm not going to get into the detail of because they're so abhorrent.
You know, there's this whole hashtag movement. Just because someone says something now and it's 2019, it doesn't make them credible. And just because they said something now and they haven't said something in a long time, it doesn't necessarily make them incredible.
Prosecutors now say that R. Kelly met one of the girls in this case at his previous sexual assault trial when he gave her an autograph, and he met another one of the girls on her 16th birthday. That girl's mother tried to intervene, but she ended up contacting R. Kelly. R. Kelly faces 3 to 7 years for each of the 10 counts that he's been charged with. Arthel.
Matt Finn, thank you very much for the update.
And there's some new developments now to tell you about in Venezuela and the fight for the very future of that embattled nation. You know, we were told a number of the country's troops are abandoning their posts at the Colombia border with Venezuela amid continued violent clashes with protesters. Those demonstrators, backed by Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido, are trying to get humanitarian aid that was sent by the U.S. and other nations into Venezuela. But disputed President Nicolas Maduro is refusing to let the material in, we're told. Brian Yanes is following this developing story from our Atlanta bureau. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Eric. Well, trucks carrying this much-needed humanitarian aid were lit on fire this afternoon by Venezuela's national police before that aid could reach desperate Venezuelans in that country. We're told that these trucks were lit on fire on the Santander Bridge in between Cúcuta, Colombia, and Uriña, Venezuela. We're told Venezuelans jumped on these burning trucks to try to salvage as much food and supplies as they can. Now, opposition leader Juan Guaido was seen on one of the humanitarian aid trucks earlier today. He's declared victory tonight, claiming that some trucks have made their way into the country, though we can't confirm that. Guaido, the man the United States recognizes as Venezuela's true president, not Nicolas Maduro, tweeted moments ago in Spanish, quote, "We continue to receive the support of the international community, which has seen with its own eyes how the usurping regime violates the Geneva Protocol, where it is clearly stated that destroying humanitarian aid is a crime against humanity. Standoffs are continuing throughout the borders of Venezuela between Colombia and as well as Brazil as President Nicolas Maduro's military forces and National Guardsmen block bridges to prevent the aid from being brought into the country. The opposition has encouraged Venezuelans to flood these bridges in the hopes that this will force the military to allow these much needed humanitarian aid trucks pass. Now, Venezuelan security forces have been firing tear gas canisters at protesters in the Venezuelan border city of Uriña, where protesters lit a bus on fire. At least 2 people have been killed today and 18 were injured on the border between Venezuela and Brazil, reportedly from pro-Maduro gangs on the border opening fire on civilians. This video was tweeted by Guaido earlier today. It shows soldiers deserting Maduro in favor of the opposition. President Trump, Vice President Pence, and National Security Advisor John Bolton have all tweeted their support for Guaido in Venezuela today. Meanwhile, President Nicolas Maduro, while he gave a speech in Caracas, urging the United States and President Donald Trump to keep their hands off of Venezuela. He also said that he is prepared to give up his life for a free and independent Venezuela. Eric.
All right, Brian, we'll see how this progresses. Thank you. Arthel?
Eric, meanwhile, here at home, Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan making a one-day trip to El Paso, Texas to visit the troops there. He traveled with General Joe Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as the Pentagon considers allocating money for the construction of a border barrier. Jeff Paul is live from our West Coast Bureau now with more. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Arthel. Yeah, Shanahan and Dunford just wrapped up that visit to the border. They worked to determine how much money will be spent of the $3.6 billion allocated from the military's construction fund. Now, they spent the day checking out the border just outside of El Paso, going into portions of New Mexico as well. By both air and on the ground, Shanahan and Dunford were given a tour and shown where any gaps in protection are and what DHS specifically needs. While visiting a National Guard mission, both of the officials at one point even fired off some version of a pepperball gun at the barrier. All this happening while the Trump administration and Democrats continue to square off regarding Trump's national emergency declaration at the border and Trump's push for a wall. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just visited the border town of Laredo, Texas, saying there is no emergency and the declaration violates the Constitution.
The wall is not effective. It's very expensive. It's nothing more than a campaign applause line for the president in one of his speeches. It has no merit in terms of effectiveness, cost effectiveness, and does not support the values of our country.
Now, in a letter to the Department of Defense, it's interesting to note that DHS requested, quote, fencing, and the DOD is said to use the term barrier. The officials staying away from using the word wall. Arthel?
Jeff Paul, thank you very much, Jeff. Eric.
And we're getting some new information today about the timing of the Mueller report release, when that could be. And we'll also tell you about what President Trump says he expects to read in it. Plus, it caused a bit of a stir. California Senator Dianne Feinstein appearing to pull rank on a group of young students. But what really happened in that testy exchange could be a lesson the senator will not soon forget.
There's no way to pay for it. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway. I don't respond to that. I know what I'm doing.
This is about the oath we take to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Our founders very wisely placed into our Constitution provision for the separation of powers, co-equal branches of government, there to be, again, a check and balance on each other.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in Laredo, Texas yesterday vowing to block President Trump's national emergency declaration. Speaker Pelosi announcing she'll bring a resolution to terminate the president's executive action. The measure, to be introduced next week, is expected to easily pass in the Democratic-controlled House, but the numbers could come up short in the Senate. Let's bring in USA Today congressional reporter Eliza Collins. Hi, Eliza.
Hi there.
All right. Well, tell us more about this resolution, and are enough lawmakers on board with it? In effect, will the House give it the green light on Tuesday?
Right. So it looks like it'll pass on Tuesday, never say never, but we expect it'll pass. It so far has more co-sponsors than the number of people needed to pass. Then it goes over to the Senate. But this resolution is called a privileged resolution, which is really important because it's different than normal resolutions. Basically, it means that once it passes the House, they have to bring it up in the Senate. Normally, the House can send over legislation if Majority Leader Mitch McConnell does not want to bring it up. He doesn't have to. He has to bring up this bill. And it also doesn't require the filibuster, the 60 votes to pass. It needs just 51. So it does make it more likely that this could actually pass both the House and the Senate. There are 47 Democrats. They're all expected to get on board. And then Senator Susan Collins, a Republican, has said she'll support it. And there very well are. It's possible there are a few other Republicans that could support it. But, of course, President Trump has vowed to veto it anyway.
So then if the resolution runs into a red light in the Senate, what happens next, apart from the veto? And what is the cautionary political tale in all of this, Eliza?
Well, this is a messaging resolution, of course. Democrats, we saw Pelosi down at the border saying there is not an emergency, pushing back at President Trump, and Republicans saying there is an emergency. Basically, Democrats are hoping to make Republicans uncomfortable. The national emergency has split the Republican Party on, because when President Trump talked about possibly declaring a national emergency, it made some Republicans uncomfortable who said that they thought this could be an overreach of executive power, and in the future, a Democratic president could declare a national emergency about, say, climate change or gun control. And so Republicans were very vocal about that. But now that he has declared the national emergency, we'll really have to see if they're going to vote to stop it, especially when the whole thing is going to run into a veto, even if it does pass.
So in the end, the question will be, can Congress put the brakes on the president's veto? And then also I want to ask you, which party faces the most political damage in the aftermath?
I really do not know. I mean, I think polling so far has shown that Americans generally side with Democrats on this. They did not support a shutdown on the wall. They were uncomfortable with a national emergency. But I'm not sure. This is likely to go into the courts because while Congress is trying to stop it on their own, the president's expected to veto it if it by some chance makes it out. It's not likely that Congress could pull together the 2/3 majority to stop the president's veto. But there are other options. There are already lawsuits filed to try to stop this. So this is going to go into the courts. This is not going away, and we'll have to see sort of where the public falls.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point on all of those points. So, Eliza Collins in your pretty red dress, me and my Kelly Green dress together, we're beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Exactly.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, a group of kids got kind of a harsh civics lesson when they confronted California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein. Kids from what's called the Sunrise Movement, an organization that describes itself as wanting to stop climate change. Well, they met with the veteran lawmaker in her San Francisco office yesterday. They demanded she support their Green New Deal. But the senator, who doesn't back the proposal, said she was not going to be lectured by school children, and then the clip went viral.
We're trying to promote the Green New Deal. Well, there are reasons why I can't, because there's no way to pay for it. You just can't go in and say, okay, we're going to take hundreds of millions from here and hundreds of millions from there. It just doesn't work that way.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years.
Well, that clip was just about a slice of a 15-minute conversation, but since that group posted the video of the meeting, the senator was criticized for her tone. She later issued a news release saying she wants the children to know she heard them loud and clear, and she's committed to doing everything she can to enact real, meaningful climate change legislation. And others will point out the whole video shows a longer conversation. That part, well, they didn't release that, it seems, what they did release, they say, kind of unfairly showed the whole full situation. So we report, you decide. So there.
Yeah. We're moving on because we're moving closer to the release of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia report. How President Trump is reacting. We'll talk about that when we come back. An Atlas Air 767 cargo plane flying for Amazon Prime has crashed on approach to Bush International Airport, 30 miles southwest of Houston. Authorities say 3 people were on board. No word on fatalities, though local reports claim no one survived. The Chambers County Sheriff's Office described it as total devastation. There's debris and landing gear scattered all over. The area where the plane went down is a muddy marsh in Anahuac's Trinity Bay, known for duck hunting. The marshland is making it for a difficult recovery as investigators search for victims and the plane's black box. Now, this is the plane before it took off this morning in Miami. The 767 is one of 30 in Amazon's fleet. It was 26 years old, according to information on its tail number. Now, Boeing has issued a statement saying in part, quote, "We are concerned about the safety of the 3 people reported to be on board. Boeing is prepared to provide technical assistance to the NTSB as it investigates this accident."
Just so sad. Well, meanwhile, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election is, we are told, winding down. Justice Department officials expect to receive a report sometime soon. But how soon? Reports predicted that it would be this coming week, but then Justice Department officials said no, not yet. So no matter when it's out, President Trump says he does look forward to reading it.
Everybody knows it's a hoax. It's one of the greatest hoaxes ever perpetrated on this country. So I look forward to seeing the report. If it's an honest report, it will say that. If it's not an honest report, it won't.
Will we get to see the whole thing, or will it stay under wraps? Chris Stazak, former senior investigative counsel for the House Oversight Committee, joins us. Also a former New York State Assistant Attorney General. And Michael J. Moore is a former U.S. attorney and partner at Pope McGlamry. Welcome to you both. Chris, let me start with you. Under the regulations, the report goes to the Attorney General, Bill Barr. Nothing about the regulations indicate that it becomes public, but they do say that, Congress gets a report of it. So do you think it will be fully released, or do you think they'll keep it under wraps?
Based on what Attorney General Barr himself said at his confirmation hearing, I believe that he will release as much information possible about the Mueller report that is allowable under the law. Now, if there's something that's classified in that report or something that otherwise shouldn't be disclosed, that's one thing. But in general, I think the Attorney General is going to disclose as much of the report as is possible and allowable under the law.
And Michael, why is that important? What do you think?
You know, I think it's important for the public to have some confidence and some degree of comfort with the amount of information that they're getting. I mean, essentially, the report's done for the American people, and we've got taxpayer dollars in it. It just needs to come out. I think, too, you know, the Attorney General is going to be faced with the knowledge that now that we've got a Democratic-controlled House, that there will be committees and subcommittees that meet in connection with the happenings there, and that other information might come forward. So I would not think that he would want one of his last legacies being that he tried to sweep something under the rug.
Yeah, in terms of the Congress, you just mentioned it. Here's our senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano, saying basically that any member of Congress can release it on the House floor, I guess. Here's what the judge said about that.
Here's what will happen. Once Congress gets its hands on that report, any member of Congress can bring it to the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate and release it with impunity. There's no legal recourse against them.
I mean, Chris, you know, that's probably going to happen.
Well, I think what the judge is talking about there, I'm assuming it's the speech and debate clause. And he's right on one hand that as a technical matter, any member of the House can go to the floor, the Senate floor, and effectively say anything they want without fear of prosecution or other consequences. In this case, I think it would be more likely that certain members of Congress would want to leak certain aspects of the report, but not do it wholesale. I think they'd rather leak it and not know who the source was if they decide to do that.
Well, Michael, wouldn't leaks, selective leaks, wouldn't that be worse as opposed to just letting the whole thing out? I mean, there could be areas of the report where someone is written about but not charged. And, you know, under DOJ regulations, they generally don't do that, except, of course, in that two famous cases with Hillary Clinton and Comey.
Well, and it's true. I mean, one of the reasons you have the rule that keeps people who are not charged, even like federal grand jury secrecy, you don't want to come in and destroy somebody's life, their reputation, their career, over conduct that, in fact, that they weren't charged with. What's interesting, though, to me, and I think what we need to watch out for, even as you played sort of the lead into our segment, was the fact that the president is already attacking the report. He's already making comments about it being a hoax, it being and basically sort of skewing it as it's there. So I'm not sure I worry about leaks and things coming from members of Congress. It may, in fact, we may see things coming from the White House. Remember that all through this investigation, it's been remarkable at the way Bob Mueller's team has been basically clear of leaks. There are plenty of other leaky sieves in Washington, D.C. Doesn't seem to be out of the special counsel's office.
Well, I mean, you raise a good point. Critics say there has already been collusion, coordination among the meetings with the Russians and some Trump officials, this sort of thing, meeting with, they say, known Russian intelligence agents and communications. They've been charged with this type of thing. So what if, it comes out and it clears the president completely, Michael? I mean, how does he say, it's a witch hunt then?
Well, and I think that's an interesting idea. And usually when somebody has sort of a clear conscience, they don't come forward and attack something before it comes out because they know that they're going to be exonerated by the information that comes forward. But I think what you've got to look at, what we are just in the public sphere, what we already know. You've got the Michael Flynn information that's out there. You've got whatever's going to come from Cohen. We know about the Trump Tower meeting. We know that polling data was shared now with Russian operatives. We know about the idea of building a tower in Moscow that was not disclosed, and contacts and business associations there. We know somehow, for some reason, we don't have the president's tax returns. So from the public side, we're operating with already this little bit of information that seems to give us an indication that there's information there that, in fact, there may be some contacts that the president hadn't disclosed, and I really think that's why we're watching him attack Bob Mueller. He's done this where he attacks the investigators, he attacks the lawyers and the legal staff of the team, and attacks the investigation. Now the report, which none of us have seen, but yet he's already taken shots at it.
Yeah, and now, Chris, the other hand, Kimberly Strassel in the Wall Street Journal wrote this, saying, quote, the collusionists need a new phase as signs grow that the special counsel won't help release their reveries of Donald Trump takedown. They had said Mr. Mueller would provide all the answers. Now that it seems they won't like his answers, Democrats and media insist that any report will likely prove anticlimactic and inconclusive. So then, if the report doesn't get what they want, Chris, do they come out and, say, well, it's his finances and everything else?
Well, I think what's going to happen is if this report is issued and it doesn't have the gotcha moment or gotcha moments that some people want, I think what you're going to expect to see here is an uptick in investigative activity, particularly in the House, but also by state attorneys general, that they'll take whatever information is in the Mueller report that for jurisdictional or other reasons Mr. Mueller could not pursue, and they'll pursue it, and they'll probably take this into the next couple of years.
And then on the other side, Michael, Adam Schiff, the congressman who's chairman of the Intelligence Committee, has been a longtime critic of the president. He wrote this in a special letter to Republicans, urging Republicans to come out and support everything. He writes that Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III may soon conclude his investigation and report. Depending upon what is in that report and what we find in our own investigations, our nations may face an even greater challenge. Well, I am alarmed at what we have already seen and found of the president's conduct and that of his campaign. I continue to reserve judgment about what consequences should flow from our eventual findings. I ask you, to the Republicans, to do the same. So, Michael, what do you think, will happen, and what do you think the upshot of all this, no matter what's in the report?
Sure. I mean, I will tell you that if I were in the administration or I were a Republican backing the president right now, that I would take no great comfort in the sentencing memorandum that came out, the document that's come out today dealing with Paul Manafort. Bob Mueller's played this exactly as he should. He's talking about defendant by defendant. But when you take the cumulative evidence as a whole, you start to see things that were not disclosed, and you see judges doing things. They have information that we don't have. Some of the Intelligence Committee has information that we don't have. Bob Mueller certainly has information that we don't have yet. So just with the information that's out there, I would take no great comfort in it. I will say this. There's been a lot of debate about whether or not a president can be indicted, and I appreciate my colleague talking about what state attorneys general may do. Remember that there's nothing that would prohibit in the OLC report, the legal counsel report, and guidance memo that would suggest that the president's business could not be charged in some type of conspiracy, that couldn't happen there. And so, again, I just would say I don't see anything to really give much. There's not a lot here that changes the day. But we do know things from the past, and I just don't think that I would take great comfort in it if I were a presidential detractor, nor would I take great comfort in it if I were a presidential supporter. We are where we are, but this information is going to continue to come out, I'm sure. I don't think we're near the end. I think that there'll be other charges and indictments and things that come down. Some of those may be sealed now. That may be something that Bob Mueller lays out in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point. Michael Moore, Chris Staszak, thank you. And no matter what happens, the Southern District and other prosecutors still have their claws into some of this too. Thank you both. Arthur.
Right. Thank you. Now,
a Florida judge has ruled federal prosecutors working under then Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta broke the law in 2008 when they concealed a plea agreement from victims of sexual abuse by wealthy hedge fund manager Jeffrey Epstein. Rick Leventhal reports on what this means for the more than 30 underage victims.
Once seen as a rising star in the Trump administration, Labor Secretary Alex Acosta is on the defensive after a federal judge ruled prosecutors under his control broke the law back in 2008 when Acosta was U.S. Attorney in Miami. The case in question involves wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein, who faced up to life in prison over allegations he sexually molested dozens of underage girls at his Palm Beach mansion after they were hired to give him massages. Epstein never went to trial. His lawyers reached what the Miami Herald called the deal of a lifetime with Acosta's prosecutors, who a judge found failed to discuss the arrangement with more than 30 young victims.
Mr. President.
The president was asked about Acosta in the Oval Office.
I really don't know too much about it. I know he's done a great job as labor secretary, and that seems like a long time ago.
Epstein's deal allowed him to plead guilty to just 2 state prostitution charges for an 18-month sentence and registered sex offender status. He also had to pay restitution to some of the victims who were kept out of the loop during negotiations. Florida federal court judge Kenneth Marr wrote Thursday, particularly problematic was the government's decision to conceal the existence of the agreement and mislead the victims to believe that federal prosecution was still a possibility, while the government spent untold hours negotiating the terms and implications of the agreement with Epstein's attorneys. Scant information was shared with victims. The judge did not overturn Epstein's plea deal. Instead, he gave federal prosecutors 15 days to confer with the victims and their attorneys to come up with a settlement. It's still possible the case could be reopened, and Epstein and others could be criminally charged. In New York, Rick Leventhal, Fox News.
Well, they'll be meeting again. But what do we really expect to come out of the second nuclear summit between President Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un? We will preview that big meeting that'll happen this coming week straight ahead here on the Fox News Channel.
If I were not elected president, you would have been in a war with North Korea. We now have a situation where the relationships are good, where there's been no nuclear testing, no missiles, no rockets. We got our hostages back. We have many of the remains back and coming back rapidly.
President Trump defending the results of his first summit with Chairman Kim Jong-un as he prepares for his second nuclear summit with the North Korean leader in Vietnam this upcoming week. With analysis on what we can expect, let's bring in retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who is a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities. So glad to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Always good to be here, Arthel. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you make of President Trump's comments they're saying that were not for him, that we would be at war with North Korea?
Well, I'm not sure that, we can really say what may or may not have happened had he not come into office. But what you can say for sure is that we're at an opportunity right now. We have a chance, to possibly even reach, peaceful outcome of this war, which we haven't had in decades. And he's absolutely right on all his comments that since he's come into office, there hasn't been the missile test, the nuclear test. We have gotten hostages back, all of those things. And those are all positive things, and all of which lower the tensions and increase the chances at peace. So he does deserve some credit for that.
Okay, very good. What is or should be President Trump's #1 objective in this second summit?
Well, without question, the number one objective is the search towards peace. Many people are saying that it should be the CVID, the irreversible nuclear deterrent, and all those. And I'm saying that should not be the primary objective, because if you set that as your primary objective and you don't get it, then people say, well, then now that we have to look back to the military option. And I'll tell you, we don't need that to keep us safe, because we are safe right now. Our overwhelming military and conventional nuclear deterrent keeps us safe no matter what happens with these. But this second meeting especially does give us genuine chance to reach a peaceful outcome, which would even eliminate the concern about future possibilities if it goes well.
Now, Professor Sung-Yoon Lee from Tufts University told Eric earlier that not in a confrontational manner, but forcefully, President Trump should look Chairman Kim in the eye and say, tear down this wall of deception. I mean, so Colonel Davis, listen, Kim Jong-un and his family, they've been playing a game of deception for generations. Why should we expect them to be on the up and up now? I mean, what has changed for North Korea?
Well, certainly they have been that, but they have also been a very rational thinking administration, especially since Kim has come to power. And I think Trump is right that he has the ability to negotiate with him, because however bad Kim Jong-un is, and he is terrible, he's done some awful things, but he also wants to survive and wants to live. And so he will be willing to make negotiations and engage in diplomacy with us if he can be convinced that over time that can work out to his favor. And if it lowers the tensions and removes the chance for war, that benefits everyone. But I will say that we have to really also understand, everyone needs to know this is something that's going to take some time. We're not going to go in there and get a full CVID after this next meeting. It's going to take a number of years, and I think people need to understand that.
It's going to take years, you said.
Yeah, it probably will, because we have to build trust in both directions, because this thing's been going on for decades.
You mentioned the word trust. That's the thing, though. After this summit, I mean, can we trust the Kim regime to allow the U.S. full and unfettered access to any and all suspicious nuclear sites to see if, in fact, they're beginning to denuclearize, and that Kim Jong-un is not just showing us, or the agents there, only the sites that he just doesn't need anyway?
Well, to kind of paraphrase Ronald Reagan, you trust but verify. So we can trust and get them to, hope that they're going to end up, with some written guarantees and some promises, but it's all going to come down to what actually happens. And do they produce that? Do they allow the inspections? And does our best intelligence, the best we can come up with, find out, is whatever they eventually declare, is that the sum total of it, or is there more? But I re-emphasized it, no matter what happens and whether he does or doesn't come fully clean, our deterrent will always keep our country safe. So that's not at risk here at all.
Let's switch gears a little bit, give you 30 seconds on this. We're talking about what's different this time with North Korea. Kim Jong-un seems to crave a certain amount of celebrity. So perhaps that might be what is different, that he wants to be seen in a more favorable light somehow worldwide. And so now you have President Trump, who is a celebrity, meeting with this guy, and Kim wants what Donald Trump had in terms of his celebrity. I don't know, does that play into this at all?
It is absolutely right. I think that's actually undervalued, because all of these things he's doing with diplomacy and wanting to have the world stage, that shows that he wants to live, meaning that he's not going to use those weapons that he has, which he considers a deterrent, on an offensive way, because that would immediately result in his destruction. And so he wants to live, so we can use that to our advantage to make sure that he, does continue to live by doing what we need him to do, i.e., coming clean on this nuclear issue.
Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, sir.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Arthel.
Thank you.
Well, back here at home in the southeast, where they got some severe weather this weekend, with parts of some states already underwater. Adam Klotz is on deck with the extreme weather forecast straight ahead. Weekend. Meteorologist Adam Klotz has been tracking the remnants and the storm from our Fox News Weather Center. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Eric. This is a large storm, and it's going to give different folks a different type of precipitation. Actually, some snow moving across the upper plains, and that could turn into a blizzard. But the real concern, at least immediately, is going to be seeing this line move across the south, flooding, potentially some big severe thunderstorms, and maybe even a couple of tornadoes before it's all said and done. This is our severe threat overnight, so you're going through portions of Tennessee, stretching down into Mississippi. That means big thunderstorms with hail, with strong winds, but possibly some tornadoes. And if we zero in on this, the exact same area, actually, we have have a very high risk of at least a tornado or two spinning up in this region. It's going to be something to pay attention to, especially if you're across northern Mississippi into portions like Memphis, some of these areas. You're going to want to watch this one overnight tonight. Otherwise, though, even if you're outside of this area, it is a large, slow-moving system, and that means that there's going to be a lot of flooding. We're already seeing it move across the Nashville area and places off towards the west. This is going to continue to be a problem as this whole system eventually stretches into the mid-Atlantic. A lot of very heavy rain. Rivers will run higher and just generally flooding in the known areas. On the backside of this system, air is a lot colder, and that's where it's turning into snow. Everything here across the red, from the Central Plains states stretching up into the upper Midwest, all of that red, those are blizzard warnings. Means visibility is going to be down under a quarter of a mile, winds up to 35 miles an hour. It is going to be whiteout conditions with heavy snow, again, kind of training right through the same area again and again and again. So it's not a very wide area, but some of these spots we're talking about getting up to 12 inches to 24 inches of snow, as it's going to be some of those whiteout conditions from Omaha stretching up past Minneapolis and then in portions of northern Wisconsin. All areas to pay attention to. When does this happen? Well, here's our future radar, and here's where we currently sit. This is mostly going to be tonight and into early tomorrow morning. So there's the movement of this. Here we are at midnight. Still some of those thunderstorms moving across the southeast. Still the heavy snow moving across the upper Midwest. Eventually, by Sunday, this does run up along the mid-Atlantic, Eric, but I think at that point this isn't as big of a system. So the people in the middle of the country, those are the ones who really have to pay attention tonight and early tomorrow morning.
All right, folks in the South and Midwest, as you say, tonight and tomorrow, just be on the lookout.
Yep.
Thank you. Arthel?
Violent clashes breaking out at Venezuela's borders as opposition leader Juan Guaido works to bring in trucks filled with aid from neighboring nations despite objections from President Nicolas Maduro. The very latest in the next hour on Fox Report.